Welcome to another episode of Unleashing the Future of Work Live, a guide podcast. And today I am joined by an awesome guy, Demi, who is an investor at Next World Capital, an early stage venture capital firm based in San Francisco that invests in category defining enterprise tech companies like Zora, Gong.io, Headspin, to name a few. Before switching coast, Demi was a venture capitalist in New York, where he invested in a variety of categories, including enterprise tech, marketplaces, and healthcare. Prior to venture capital, he started his career at Goldman Sachs, advising some of the world's largest companies. Demi developed a passion for tech and entrepreneurship while he was a student at Johns Hopkins University, starting companies and making angel investments at an early age. Before college, Demi lived in Nigeria and Canada, spending much of his leisure time perfecting his soccer skills. And we'll probably dive in on that with him as well. And he plans to pick up the sport again one day, but till then, will make do with waking up before sunrise to watch his favorite teams. And, today we're really going to be talking about tech, venture capital, as well as, one of my favorite topics right now, software as a service in, I think, a post-COVID-19 world. And without further ado, I want to check in on the community. Let me know where you're tuning in from. If you're tuning in right before I bring Demi on, let's show you some love. Where are you watching from? Nigeria, Canada, the UK? Let us know in the comments below. All right. Let's check it out, y'all. So with that said, let me go ahead and bring my boy Demi on. What's up, Demi?
Hey Tim, how you doing?
I'm doing well, man. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good, man. Great to see you.
You too, man. How have you been hanging in there during COVID-19?
Yeah, I currently live in Oakland, in the Bay
Yeah.
Area. And I just moved here about maybe 10 or so weeks ago. So unfortunately, 6 of those weeks have been spent sheltering in place.
Yeah.
But I really gotten to know the neighborhood really well as
Yeah.
a result. So kind of trying to take the silver lining from
Yeah.
the entire experience. So it's been good. I really like Oakland. Before that, I lived in San Francisco, just
Yeah.
across the Bay Bridge. So I thought it was nice to just kind of check out different parts of the Bay Area and kind of see what the rest of it has to offer.
Dude, shout out to you, man. Let's show some love to the amazing community members of the Unleashing the Future of Work community who are showing up and showing out. Shout out to Rachel who's tuning in. Hey, Rachel, how you doing? Shout out to Nyla who's tuning in from Houston as well. And Rachel is tuning in from Dallas, D-Town in the house. I love that. Christina's tuning in from Philadelphia. And Nyla is in Texas as well. I'm actually in Texas too, Nyla, so shout out to you.
Nice.
And Demilade is tuning in from Houston. So let's dive deep, Demi. I would love for the community. How did you get in tech? And how do you get a private equity, right, in the work that you're doing right now?
Yeah, for me, I would say I was always interested in business and, starting businesses. I grew up in Nigeria and, back then, conglomerates were very popular. The biggest kind of company was a company called Dangote, which is, they do everything from sugar to flour to cement, kind of very, very broad business. So I was always kind of excited by that idea. And when I got to college, I started a company with a friend of mine. And it was in the process of starting that company that, we were students, so we didn't have capital. So we started to look around for investors. And it was through that process that I learned about, venture capital to start with. And, I was really struck by the experience because we actually went down to UPenn and we pitched a group of students who had gotten capital from a venture capital fund, and we're dispersing that capital to companies started by other undergraduates. And I really loved the idea, and it really stuck with me, and it was something that I definitely wanted to pursue. And so I kind of set off trying to just learn as much as I could about finance. I interned in investment banking. I did a little bit of investing in the stock market, just trying to get as much experience as I could. And when I got to my senior year of college, in my senior spring, about this time, I decided to make a trip out to San Francisco to just come to the mecca of technology and just see if people would be interested in backing this idea of raising a fund to invest in students from Johns Hopkins University, where I went to college. And the reason why I had this idea was because there's in Baltimore, where Johns Hopkins is based, there's very few, if any, venture capitalists, and so
It's a dead man's.
exactly. It would be nice to have a little bit of capital to kind of spur these students on and encourage them to start, companies that they're passionate about. And so, I came to San Francisco in March of 2015 to do that, and I came back again in June of 2015, where I interned at a venture capital fund called 500 Startups. And I think that's really where I cut the bug. I really enjoyed my experience working at 500 Startups. I was working with these 12 companies. They were all very early stage companies, usually teams of 2 or 3 people trying to, get a first version of the product out.
Yeah.
And I was just amazed at how much grit and how much passion these people poured into the companies that they were building. And so I knew that I wanted to come back and do something very similar to that for in the early days of my career. But there was in between coming back to venture capital. I ended up spending 2 years working in investment banking. So that's the time I spent at Goldman Sachs doing investment banking for industrial companies. And the more time I spent with industrial companies, the more I knew I wanted to go back to working with tech companies. So really, was fortunate enough to join a firm in New York called First Mark Capital, where I invested across different categories like enterprise software, healthcare, ed tech, marketplaces. And through that process of just trying out different, categories, I realized I really loved enterprise software, and I wanted to come back to the Bay Area to invest in enterprise software. So, that's how I got into it. It all started from starting a company and learning a little bit more about, approaching investors, and that took me on this journey that I'm on today.
Man, that's it's crazy too, because it seems as if like early on you really had that entrepreneurial vigor. So shout out to everyone that's tuning in. If you're an entrepreneur on your entrepreneurial hustle, show some love in the comments. And I think what's fascinating to me is like you had this entrepreneurial vigor and you realize, there's this huge opportunity for me to go to the mecca of tech, being San Francisco, and make something happen. I wanted to ask you, how did you, because I think a lot of people, they want to maybe get into private equity or they maybe want to get into tech. How did you overcome the challenges and kind of like the knowledge gaps that comes with, being a venture capitalist?
Yeah, I think honestly, I think the honest answer is you never do. I think every day is a day of learning. For me, I started a venture capital fund. So to go out and pitch a fund to other people, you have to understand how these funds work. You have to do a lot of research into the legal structures, and how you structure the fees and the carry, and what check sizes and your portfolio construction. So what check sizes do you want to write? How many companies you want to invest in? You have to think all these things through. And so, the process of starting that fund was a forcing function to understand the business model of venture capital. And so, that enabled me to just have more knowledge about these things than I, ordinarily would have been interested in. And then the investing side is something totally different, because now you're asking yourself, okay, with all these early stage companies, how do I actually assess, which ones I want to invest in and which ones I don't want to invest in? Which is, it's an art, and the more you do it, hopefully the more patterns you see, and can make better investments. At the end of the day, I've always invested in early stage with a little bit of later stage investing, but mostly on the early stage side. And it always starts with the team and understanding why this team is the best team to lead this company and to build a company in this space, or build this product. So there has to be strong, what people sometimes call founder market fit. So because if the founder doesn't have the right background, which could be industry experience or personal experience, or just there has to be some factor that shows that, okay, this person, really is, one of the few people that can build this company and do it successfully. So it starts with the team. And then as venture capitalists, we seek to invest in big markets. The ultimate goal of any VC is to, invest in a company that can be as big as Google or Facebook or Amazon or any of
Yeah.
these large technology companies. And so the market size has to be large enough to support, a large company. And so, we'll spend time thinking about, is this $100 million market? Is this a single digit $1 billion market? Is this a market in the tens of billions and the hundreds of billions? So we need to understand the magnitude of the market that the company is going after. And then the third thing I would say is product or engineering. And basically, what that just boils down to: how much better is this product than existing products that are out there, and competing for the same budget? Because the reality is, even if I'm using something today and it works, if you bring me something that's only 2 times better, I may not care to switch because I already have something that works, and there's a switching cost to anything that I do. So any startup has to build a product that is just so much better than what you're currently doing, that it's worth it to pay the switching cost of moving from your current tool to this new tool that this startup is pitching you. So the product is something that we care a lot about, and it's how does the product compare to incumbent solutions that are in the market today, but also, how does the product compare to even other startups that are being formed at the same time? Because in today's world where anybody can start a technology company, the tools are widely available.
Yeah.
Oftentimes there's more than one company starting the same, trying to build the same type of product. I'm a little bit sorry to say, I guess it depends a little bit on the space you're in, but I'm sorry to say, I think if you're an entrepreneur, you should assume that there's somebody just as smart, just as hungry as you are, building the exact same company. Because I'll tell you, I'm always shocked when I come across one company and I do a little bit of research, and there's like 3 other companies, with great teams also building the same type of product. So we need to understand the product landscape. I would say those are the 3 core things. There's definitely other like secondary considerations, like how is the company going to market? What are their competitive advantages? Does this team have a unique insight? Timing is another. Timing is a pretty critical one. But if you don't have a big enough market and your product is not differentiated, then I'm not even going to bother to think about the timing. Right? It just doesn't matter at that point in time. So for me, I would say I screen deals based on the team and the product that the company's built and the market, and then if those check out, then start to think about some of these other secondary factors. And on the timing point, we discussed this a little bit previously, but timing is so critical. I mean, if you're building a company that helps people do remote work right now, like there's been no better time, right?
Yeah, right.
Right. So if you're building something in telemedicine, there's no better time to do that. If you're building something in e-commerce, there's no better time to do it. So timing is a very critical one that entrepreneurs have to harness to their advantage, because it's kind of like rocket fuel, right? Suddenly people are just demanding what you have when they were not previously doing that before. And I'm really excited to see how entrepreneurs will build new products that take advantage of how COVID-19 has changed the way we work and the way we socialize, and the way we and the way we also consume what we consume as consumers. And there's been so many examples. I mean, I read something recently about how a lot of the telecom companies were reporting that the call time, like the amount of time people spend on calls, is through the roof. Like it's even something as basic as phone calls, that there's increased demand for that, because now people are stuck at home and they can't, they don't have all the other things that have been distracting them. So I think for entrepreneurs in every category, look, there's going to be winners and losers, but you have to kind of use or harness this time to your advantage.
And I think it's powerful what you're saying to it, and you kind of giving the landscape of how you as a VC eye a company, and shout out to anyone who's looking to get into private equity or tech. I mean, you just heard it here first on how do you think about building your company. If you're looking to raise capital, I mean, I think having this perspective is invaluable. So let us know if you're trying to build a company right now. If you're looking to build a company, make a comment. We'll show you some love. And shout out to Michael, who's viewing from Michigan, New York, and Seattle. That's wild. He's viewing from three places. That's awesome, Michael. So Demi, let me ask you, because I think where it's now in discussion that we might be going into an economic downturn or recession. And one of the things that we were talking about and prior is, this idea of building a recession-proof company. Right. What are some of the industries that you think are recession proof? And I know one of them that we should interest in is in SaaS. I believe SaaS is a recession proof type of industry, right? Especially if you have the right product and it can scale. But I would love to get your thoughts.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, when it comes to SaaS, it really does depend on the company that you are. And basically, we think about this secondary impacts, right? So in general, as a SaaS company, you're less affected because you're not necessarily a transportation company, and people are no longer using scooters or taking these car rides. You're not necessarily a travel company where suddenly all your business is gone overnight. But if you're selling your software to travel companies or to transportation companies or to any restaurants, which are obviously impacted by the current environment, then your business will be affected because your end customers are being affected. So when it comes to SaaS, it really you have to be selling to categories that are not going to be affected by something like COVID. Otherwise, some part of your business will suffer. And then I think even more broadly, even if you don't sell to travel or hospitality or entertainment or anything like that, the fact of the matter is that your customer base is also worried about just an economic downturn, and so they're not going to be spending willy-nilly on any solution anymore. Everybody's looking at their software spend, they're looking at their headcount, and they're thinking about where can we make cuts this year so that we don't overspend or overextend ourselves when it comes to cash. So I think SaaS is more recession proof than certain other categories. But even within SaaS, there are definitely winners and losers, and everybody's definitely tightening the belts. So no one is going to escape this unscathed. Everyone's going to have a scar.
Unless you're already like a Salesforce or a Microsoft and an Amazon, who are like they're still pretty good.
Yeah, I think even just looking at SaaS, because for the companies that we work with, all of those companies are planning hyper growth years. So even if they'll still grow, but they're not going to grow as much as they had originally predicted. So everybody's going to have some type of impact. You're going to have to pare back your expectations for the year, or if you're unfortunate, you might actually even sell below what you sold in the prior year. So everyone's going to have some type of impact to their business. I mean, even Google mentioned on their earnings report that there wasn't as much demand for ads as there were previously. Facebook said a similar thing. There's more people on Facebook, so there's more eyeballs, but there's no ads to show those people. So no money, coming through the door for someone like Facebook, right? So everyone's going to be impacted in some way, shape or form. I mean, there are of course like beneficiaries like Zoom and Slack. If your business is pure play, remote collaboration or a pure play product that benefits from remote work, then or just the nature of living and working remotely, then you might you have good problems. You have problems everybody would like to have, like like scale. How do you scale up to 10x or 20x more users than before? But I think for everybody else, that this will leave some kind of scar tissue.
That's huge. That's powerful. Shout out to Michael who's saying, man, he's loving what you're mentioning, Demi. For you, we were talking about how like, actively as an investor, you're always looking at, what are the next emerging companies? And I love how you mentioned that you think that a lot of the companies who are in that remote work or even just like online learning, because those are some emerging industries right now that are booming. What, for you is an industry that you're really excited about, right? And that you're eyeing, because you work across enterprise tech, consumer tech, and healthcare, right? So what are some industries that you're really excited about in a post-COVID-19 future?
Yeah, honestly, there's several. I'll share a little bit about the remote work side or remote collaboration side, just because I think that category is definitely having a moment. I would say, like, when it comes to remote collaboration, let's just say the three foremost tools are Zoom, Slack, and Microsoft Teams. and all the other kind of knockoffs of these products. But those products are not built for a post-COVID world. They were built pre-COVID,
Wow.
and they had success. They had success because yes, there was a trend. When it comes to video collaboration, like video communication, there was a trend when it comes to text communication. But they're really having a moment right now, right? Because everybody needs to communicate remotely, and so people that previously would not use the product are now forced to actually get on it. But like I mentioned in my first statement, these products were built pre-COVID. They were built
Yeah.
from a world where they're assuming that you're working in your office and
Yeah.
using their product. And I shared a little bit about Zoom, where you launch Zoom and it takes up it takes up your entire screen, and that's fine if I'm in a conference room in my office and we have a screen up front and everybody has their laptop, so you can still you can still like take notes in a meeting or like whatever the case might be, or look something up. That's not fine when I'm working from home and I need to take notes and Zoom is taking up my entire screen. Like
Yeah.
now I'm forced like manually split up my screen into different halves so I can look at the person on one half and then take notes on the other half. It just doesn't. It's not architected for a world where you're working primarily from home. So I think the second generation of the post. Another way to say it is like if Zoom were to have been founded post COVID
Yeah.
versus pre-COVID, it would be an entirely different product because
Yeah.
they will think about a world where most people are working, from home and architect
Yeah.
towards that. So I'm excited about that second generation of tools that looks at the world through the lens of majority of people working from home and how do we build, for that group of people. And there's been a couple of tools that I've announced recently, such as Around.co, which is it's a video conferencing tool, but then it's one that's cognizant of the fact that you're working from home, and so it's designed in a way that allows you to collaborate to collaborate with while you're doing that. So it doesn't eat up your entire screen. It makes sure that the camera is always focused on your face because in your office, right? You have a setup and you have the camera stationary and you can see the entire room. When it comes to my laptop, I might move a couple of degrees here and there, and like you might see half of my face this time, and the other half the other time. So Around make sure that it's always focused on your face, for example. So I just those little things do make a difference. And then I'm also excited about communications infrastructure, and it's a space that I've looked at before, and I think it's interesting because I was very surprised when I learned this, but even this video stream that we're having is very, very difficult to build. When it comes to if you've ever done a call with somebody who lives in a different country, the technology that goes into that communication process is very complicated to build. Same thing for voice calls, video calls, whatever the case might be, and it's also complicated depending on the browser you're using. So different browsers always getting updated. You have to keep track of all these different updates. Like there's so many layers of complexity to communications, and so typically what you'll find is that platforms like the one that we're using for this video call will typically not actually build their own video infrastructure. They will call the API of a company that specializes in video infrastructure. Same thing for any telemedicine platform. I was researching telemedicine at one point, and I was surprised to learn that a lot of these telemedicine companies actually use someone else's video technology
not their own
to conduct the video calls. My mind was actually blown because it's like, oh wait, like all of you are just being powered by 4 companies basically that are out there. And similar things with online learning or school. Look at schools today. They're not going to build their own video platform. They're just saying, hey, let's sign up with Zoom and get students back in school. So communications infrastructure is hard, and if it's not your specialty, then there's no point of you focusing on that. You should go focus on what you do best, whether that's telemedicine, whether that's education, whether that's hosting a platform like this. And so from my perspective, the rising tide of remote work, the rising tide of increased communication is going to lift the boats of all of these communications infrastructure companies. So Twilio, for example, is probably the biggest one that people are familiar with. But there's also companies like TalkBox out there that also provide these APIs that enable video calls or even phone calls to take place. So I'm excited about that category because I know that as an investor, oftentimes we have to try and pick, the best company in the category. And if you think about telemedicine, it's going to be, there's so many telemedicine platforms out there. It's more challenging to find the needle in a haystack that will dominate, versus in the communication infrastructure world, there's not as many players. And regardless, this is a rising tide that's going to lift everyone's boat. So I'm pretty excited about that particular space, as more and more people need to use videos. And even beyond just things like telemedicine and so on and so forth, if you imagine, let's say you and I would build an application. Let's say it's an application that lets people do podcasts or do some of these kind of live conversations. We might want to add a function where one of our audience can actually jump into the video and ask us a question, right? So we're not going to build our own infrastructure to do that. We're going to implement something from one of these communication products. Maybe a better example is if, let's say you're using your email tool, right? Let's say you use something like not Gmail, maybe Hotmail or Yahoo Mail or some just like not very popular email provider. Let's say that email provider now wants to add a way for people to do video calls inside of their application. They can just tap one of these communication APIs to do so. So my point is that even if telemedicine, online classes, like those are natural video use cases, like you're going to be on video if you're in a telemedicine conversation or in an online class. But there's another group of applications where you're not always going to be in video, but you might want to be in certain moments. And so those applications, I think, will also create more demand for this communication infrastructure that these third-party companies provide. So I think it could be a potential gold mine. So we'll hopefully see, and hopefully we'll see how that thesis plays out over time.
Yeah, no, I feel as if so. Shout out to Christina, who's saying build IP and then buy commodity. That is true. That is a great move. But I think what's so fascinating about what you're saying is the fact that right now, if you're building a company focused on infrastructure and can be just integrating like other companies can plug in, this is your moment, especially in the synchronous or even asynchronous communication space, right? And Twilio is a company that I've always been fascinated by. And they even do text APIs, right? So for people who want to message, so they have all kinds of APIs. And I think what's so interesting for us, because with Guy, we're kind of building our own technology, but long term we want to have APIs that people can pull from, but also API integrations that we can integrate into on different platforms. And I think like what's so powerful is that the company that's thinking about being open source and how do we kind of like share the abundance, or how do we kind of have people find us or integrate into us, are going to be the companies that are really successful in the long run. It's not really like closed circuit companies. And I would love to get your thoughts on that, man.
Yeah, I think open source is really interesting. And it's not one that I spend a lot of my time in. And I think there are definitely different models. And I would say like, I'm definitely seeing a little bit of activity in that space though. So there's a company that I came across yesterday, and because of COVID and people having to work from home, they are actually open sourcing their technology so that more people can use it to build better machine learning models. So I think open source it can be a two-edged sword, and I think people definitely they manipulate it a little bit and use it to their benefit. Because if I'm giving you the reason I'm giving you my product, as an open source tool, is to entice you, right? It's almost like a freemium. Like you come in, you try it a little bit, and then if you want to do anything extra, then you have to pay me for a more commercial version of that product. Yeah. So I think open source is great. I think, and especially if you're in the developer world, I mean, that world is even like open source first, because everybody's technical. Everybody wants to see, what is behind the hood before they actually, adopt it fully. So in the developer world, you almost have no choice but to go open source. And that's just the ethos. I mean, if you're a developer building a product, you wouldn't even think twice. Oftentimes, when I'm in conversations with developers, they want to build something open source, and we're telling them, no, don't open source it. Let's keep it closed.
Yes.
So you can monetize it more easily because open source is a bit more challenging to monetize because
Yeah.
if you don't draw the lines well enough, then you might be giving away too much and you will not be able to
Yeah.
actually commercialize. So and I think when it comes to open source, I talked a little about communication APIs. So the dirty secret of the communication API world is that a lot of those companies are built on an open source project. so there's so many layers to this thing. So just to help people visualize it, you have a telemedicine company that's built on top of a communication API that's built on top of an open source project. And you
Wow.
need those communication APIs because the open source project is too hard for most people to just it's raw, like
Yeah.
it's like a brick, right? You can't just if you want a house but you're getting a brick, so you need somebody to actually build the house for you, and then you can live in the house and do your video
Yeah.
conversations. So I think open source is exciting, and depending on it depends depending on the motives of the people that develop the project. There's still opportunity for people to come in between
Mm.
and make commercial versions of that product, or if it's a product where the goal from the get-go is to commercialize it, then that one company will both manage the open source version and the commercialized version. And to even extend the idea of open source a bit further, it goes beyond technical topics. I think a lot of people
Mm.
today are open sourcing. How does our company work remotely? What is our technology
Yeah.
stack for remote work? What are our playbooks for working remotely? So I think the business world is also trying to find ways of open sourcing some of its best practices. A really good example is Atlassian. So Atlassian is a company that builds collaboration tools for product teams, for development teams. They also own Trello, which is a popular like Kanban board for product management. And they do a lot of acquisitions. They're pretty acquisitive. So they open sourced like their M&A process, their
Wow.
mergers and acquisition process, because they want because oftentimes like if Atlassian is acquiring a company, Atlassian is typically massive compared to that company, and so they have much more leverage in that conversation. But that's just not the culture that they have internally, and so they want to be open book in terms of their process and their standard merger agreements and so on and so forth. In
Mm.
venture, I mean, we've had the KISS agreement for a very long time. KISS means keep it simple, stupid. Because in a very early stage deal where a company is just getting off the ground, it doesn't make sense to pay expensive lawyers for hours and hours of work. You want a very simple agreement where that's not going to be costly. So
Mm.
we started off having the KISS back in 2014, 2015. Then Y Combinator KISS was started by 500 startups. Then you had Y Combinator come up with the SAFE agreement. So
Mm.
and then some lawyers have also done various other types of open source legal agreements for consummating early stage venture capital deals. So there have been various examples of open source as well in the business world too.
Yeah, no, it's powerful. I love how you said, everything's being open source. Like mergers, acquisition reports. I mean, and I think I think it's a right now we're seeing a return back to simplicity from many tech companies, right? And even with the company you mentioned, in a way, like they're thinking about what does a product look like in a post COVID-19 world based on simplicity. The value of open source is how do we simplify but still be accessible at the same time. And
Mhm.
I think what I love, and I would love to get our amazing community's thoughts on this. Make sure to show some love in the comments. If you have any thoughts or any questions for Demi, please. When you think about how private equity has been affected by COVID, what are some of your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in terms of the industry, I think I can speak on the venture capital side where we're working with small companies, and small meaning some of those companies could be generating single digit revenues, some of them could be generating tens of
Mm.
millions, but they're not like a publicly traded company or mature company just yet. And I would say like on our end, when COVID first struck, the first thing to do and the natural inclination is to check on our portfolio companies. In that sense, you're like a mother hen, and then you have all these all these chicks, right? And then you're like, okay, well, we need to make sure that our portfolio companies are fine. So you actually find a lot of people maybe for the first 2, 3, 4 weeks are focusing on their portfolio companies because some portfolio companies may have been planning to raise capital in the coming months. So how do you capitalize them? Probably between the existing investors, because this is not a time where a lot of new investors will be writing checks. You might have had portfolio companies that were midstream in a fundraising process. So how do you ensure that you get that process to a close? You have some portfolio companies that were further along in fundraising. They had term sheets, but term sheets are getting pulled, or investors are saying, actually, we valued your company at 100 million, but now it's going to be 70 or 60 because the economic environment has changed. So I mean, there's so many scenarios of what could have happened in someone's portfolio. So the first thing is just to take care of the portfolio, make sure portfolio companies are doing well and will be in a strong position to weather the storm. Because if they can't weather the storm, then that's going to have an impact on portfolio performance for venture capitalists. And then once and that was also challenging because suddenly you have the government making many important moves. So the government announced the PPP loans and like the and as other small business loans. And so there's those are new regulations no one has seen. There's been no precedents before. And so venture capitalists, companies, lawyers, outsourced CFO and accounting firms are all working together to figure out what does this mean for for my portfolio companies? Which portfolio companies are eligible? Which ones are not eligible? Just triaging the entire information flow that's coming through. So, the first thing was really just figuring out the portfolio and figuring out how do we capitalize these companies to make sure they're okay. I think now you're definitely starting to, and I'm going to call out my colleagues in the industry because basically, you have this scenario where where COVID struck, and the question from a lot of startups then is, are venture capitalists still investing capital? Everybody's asking, and every venture capitalist is saying, we're open for business. Yes, we're open for business. But I think many of us realize that is just not the case. Especially depending on where your portfolio companies are in their fundraising cycle, where your fund is in its fund life cycle as well. I think we were fortunate where a lot of our portfolio companies had already raised capital in Q4 or earlier in Q1, and so we didn't have so much. We weren't so worried about the cash runway of our portfolio more than we're worried about, okay, what does this mean for your 2020 plan? So to speak, how much are you going to hit in 2020, just given the economic environment? So where do you need to tighten the belt a little bit? Just kind of given our understanding of what's going on in the environment, we realize that a lot of people are saying they're open for business, but that is just not the case because people have so much to do in terms of their portfolio. And I think the second part of that is once you actually finish your portfolio triage, once you've reset your 2020 plans with all your portfolio companies, that now you have a little bit more time. You're considering new investments, but will you actually pull the trigger? That's a totally different question. So you might be open for a business, you're done with your portfolio, but there's just uncertainty in the market. And are you going to be able to go before your investment committee and say, I want to invest in this business at this particular point in time, and I believe this is what is going to happen? When, I mean, if you're being honest, everybody knows what's going to happen. So there's just it's more challenging now to make an investment because you have to convince others, and it's hard to do that if you're not sure yourself. What's going to happen in the market. And I think some of that is being borne out in the data already, where you're seeing the total number of dollars invested, declining from the prior year and from the prior quarters. You're seeing the number of deals that are being done also declining from the prior year and prior quarters. So the venture capital market tends to react very quickly to these kinds of changes in the public markets or in the economic environment, because we have to be we can't ignore what's going on in the broader world, and we also have to be worried about our capital, whether it will be preserved. As with everything, there are exceptions. I mean, some of the largest companies, I'd say there are exceptions in the sense that because of the environment, companies that raised capital before COVID are starting to feel a little bit less comfortable, even with the capital that they have. So you are seeing some companies re-engage with venture capitalists that were interested in their rounds previously. Maybe those venture capitalists could not get into those rounds, and now there's a catalyst where, hey, you might want to take on a few million more bucks just to make yourself feel, just to make sure you don't feel too much heat, depending on how long COVID
Some
lasts.
cushion.
So yeah, exactly. So you have a world where some people cannot raise capital at all. You have a world where some people who already raise capital are able to take on a little bit more capital, if they're younger. And then you have a world where the names that everybody knows, like Stripe, for example, they're able to raise hundreds of millions of dollars because there's still a lot of opportunity ahead of those companies. There's a catalyst in the sense that the economic environment is not so friendly. So if you had an IPO plan, you might that might have been pushed out now by 2 years or 3 years. Airbnb raised $1 billion as well because they were supposed to go public, I think, this year.
In debt, right?
But now, yeah, in debt and convertibles and different kinds of securities. So you have a world where the marquee names are able to raise large amounts of capital because people are still interested in getting into those companies, and this is an opportunity to do so at a reduced price than before.
Yeah, no, it's fascinating, man. How the cycle, right? That and the ripple effect that COVID-19 has created. And I even love how you mentioned that. For you just have to react and say, okay, how do we take care of our portfolio companies? And shout out to everyone that's tuning in. I want to kind of ask you, what would you, because I'm seeing companies like Airbnb, Facebook, and all of them are adapting their product for this new world. I think for any entrepreneur right now that's building a business, what are 2 to 3 things that you would encourage them to look out for if they want to be successful in building a venture post COVID-19?
Yeah, I think as with everything, you have to. There's this quote that's been going around. Never waste a good crisis. If there's a crisis at hand, then there's opportunity. And certain opportunities are opening up, other ones are closing off. So for me, I would encourage entrepreneurs you need to absorb the crisis. Some people are going through something that they're going through layoffs.
Yeah.
That's something that you never want to go through. You never want to have to do. It's never easy. So I think you have to absorb the fact that there is a situation going on. You have to try and take care of your existing customers. You have to try and take care of your employees as much as you can as well. And I think once you resurface from that process, you have to think about what are the opportunities that are opened up from my particular business as a result of COVID. You mentioned Airbnb. There was actually a call on LinkedIn where Brian Chesky was talking live about how Airbnb adapted to COVID-19, and you talked about how people were there was a sudden demand for longer term stays.
Wow.
And that's because people are saying, if I have to shelter in place, why do I have to stay in Oakland or Houston? Why can't I just go to Miami or go to I've always wanted to go to? And no one knows how long COVID-19 will last, so people are not going there for a week or two. They're going there for an entire month or longer at a time. So I think every company has to look at its business and see, and ask how can they potentially capture the benefit of COVID-19. We've seen companies, for example, in the financial planning, or we've been speaking to a lot of accounting and CFO firms recently, and they've talked about how all these small businesses need help with like the PPP loans and with the small business loans, and they set up all these campaigns or banners on their website saying, hey, we can help you actually get access to those loans or fill out the paperwork to get access to those loans. And when they have so customers are coming in for the PPP loans or SMB loans or whatever the case might be, but then they can also sell them on their entire suite of CFO services that they provide. So I think each company needs to look at its business and try and find ways that it can benefit, and the way is going to be different for every single company that's out there. So I'm trying to think of other examples. I know Shopify just released a new product where people can a new app,
right?
Customers can buy products on from Shopify through the app, and this is the best time because everybody's stuck at home and all they have is, is they're looking for ways to entertain themselves. I mean, if I may, I would say this might be a great time to start a new social network because everybody's stuck at home. Everyone's stuck at home and they need a way to. They're looking for different ways to socialize. So I think everyone needs to look at their businesses and figure out, okay, are there opportunities for me to take advantage, of this scenario? I think, LinkedIn, for example, I didn't really know LinkedIn did video conversations with people like Brian Chesky or with any influencers. So that's a new way that LinkedIn is adapting its own business to to the times. And when I saw, I was like, oh, Brian Chesky's live. I wasn't planning to. I didn't come to LinkedIn to spend time with Brian Chesky, but it was live. So I was like, oh, let me at least hear what he's saying for a couple of minutes. So I think everyone needs to find ways that they can adapt or take advantage of COVID, because I think of it as it's a wave, and you got a surfboard and you got to ride the wave, somehow, however you can.
Remote work, remote learning, whatever it is, ride the wave. So, and I love how you said that. Never waste a good crisis, because I think even in the crisis, it's a constraint for possibility, right? And and I think that's key to having an entrepreneurial mindset. Demi, thank you so much for being on the Unleashing the Future Work, a guide podcast. If you had any parting words for our amazing community, what would it be, man?
Yeah, I think it's an opportunity. I think a lot of people in the audience are entrepreneurs, or thinking about making entrepreneurial moves. I would say this is again, never waste a good crisis. This is a time where the world is changing significantly, and there is going to be some way that you can take advantage of that change, either in a business you're currently working on, or in a business that you want to start. And there are suddenly these new tailwinds. There's this COVID is a catalyst for for businesses, and so this is an opportunity to take advantage of that and adapt and create a business that can take advantage of the new consumer behaviors. I've seen some venture capitalists write about ways that they expect consumer behavior to change following COVID. I think I was joking with Tim yesterday that just because COVID hit doesn't mean we're not going to have new restaurants. There will be new restaurants.
They'll just look a little bit different.
They're going to look a lot different than than the ones that we had before COVID. So if you're an entrepreneur out there, I would try to reimagine how will COVID change your particular industry, and that is going to create demand for for certain for new types of products that the industry previously had no need for, but now it does, because there's a chance that something like COVID could happen again. I was saying previously to someone that even for myself as an investor, from now on till I forget about COVID, I'm always going to ask myself, how is this business going to be impacted by by a potential pandemic? Even if another pandemic doesn't happen again, I will still ask myself, how will this business that I'm trying to invest in be impacted by the pandemic? So it's a time for industries to be completely reimagined from the ground up. It's a time for entirely new ideas as well to arise, and to take advantage of how people will be working differently in future. People will be people will be kind of consuming products differently, or consuming goods differently in future as well. So there's never been a better time. I think before COVID, you might have been asking yourself, what should I start? What idea should I start? And you can't really decide. But I think now, there's a bit more constraints on your idea universe, and I think it's a great opportunity to just take advantage of that and go for it.
It's time to build something, y'all. Michael, Andre, Eric, Damilola, Ronald, it's time to build something if you have it in mind. And with that said, for any of you all who are interested in connecting with Demi, make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn. Where else can the people find you, Demi?
Yeah, I'm on LinkedIn. Just drop me a note and just let me know you are on the podcast listing, and I'll definitely accept. You can also reach me on Twitter. My handle is @Demi_Obayomi, Obayomi. And looking forward to staying in touch with the community. Looking forward to keep on being a part of the community, and I hope I'll be back again sometime. Maybe sometime after COVID has cycled through, we can talk about, okay, what is the world actually looking like
We would love it, man. We would love that. We should definitely have you on for another episode. And shout out to everyone who has been commenting. Someone mentioned ServiceNow's earning reports yesterday was extremely interesting. Work from home, remote school, etc. SaaS solutions will have long-term play post-pandemic. True that. And with that said, if you're interested, make sure you go ahead and connect with Demi. And if you're interested in getting into tech, check out the breakintobigtech.com course that I'm working on with my good friend John Marty. And more importantly, go build something. This is the time for you to build, as Demi says. And more importantly, have the confidence and understand that within constraints, there are opportunities and possibilities. Thank you so much, Unleashing the Future of Work community. If you're interested in being a guest or a sponsor on the Unleashing the Future of Work A Guide podcast, check out UTFOW.com, UTFOW.com. With that said, thank you for tuning in. I will talk to you soon. Peace, love, and bye-bye.
All right. Thank you all. Thanks, team.